fuels the mission of the church. We're interested in assisting European leaders to think biblically, reflect theologically, and act missionally. So we've just recently finished a series on a biblical theology of mission, and today we're in a second episode case study of sorts to show how such a biblical theology of mission actually works, how it actually plays itself out in the world, and to show what it could look like. So we will discuss the idea of relevance and sort of contextualization into the summertime with Generation Z. Talking about things like relevance, contextualization, especially as we're thinking of moving into the summer, because Tyler and I, this is our last episode before we embark on the summer season. It's kind of sad.
It is a little sad. No more regular conversations. Well, we'll keep having regular conversations, and I'm sure some of those will turn into future episodes come fall.
As always, because my brain never turns off. So, Tyler, before we jump into the Gen Z discussion again, once more, from, I think it was episode 8. So we'll sort of continue that discussion from a while back, but also give some updates as well. And how about we start with a personal update from you, Tyler?
Oh, sure.
What will you be doing over the summertime?
So the last probably 6 months have been pretty crazy, and so I'm looking forward to taking a little bit slower, having more time for reading and for research, but also we have some cool opportunities as a family to participate in some ministry together. So, for example, we are going to something called Creative Campus in Poland, which is for creative leaders, particularly worship leaders from all over Central and Eastern Europe, and I'll do some teaching there. And some other teaching opportunities like that. So it should be fun
And creative,
absolutely,
at that campus in Poland.
Yeah, creative at the campus together with people.
Well done. Yeah, slowing down is. Yes. That sounds great.
What about you? What are your plans for the summer?
So we, as a part of serving with Josiah Venture, will be going on what we call home assignment, going back to connect with people in the United States this summer. So we're looking forward to that in many, many ways. It's going to be really fun to have conversations and be like, you won't believe what God is doing in Central and Eastern Europe, not just here in the Czech Republic where I and you, Tyler, currently live, but more broadly because of what God is, how he's using things like Formation College. So we're excited about that. We're maybe not quite as excited at this point of the summer weather being so different in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
It's just hotter and more humid. And we also need to get some clothes for our daughter because she's growing like crazy.
Oh, so good.
So
there's some good things to look forward to.
Exactly. Yeah. And as I'm reflecting on this episode in particular, one thing, when I was growing up, I used to like going to buffets at restaurants that have buffets. So those don't really exist in the same way here in the Czech Republic. There's like cafeteria style. You go up and you tell them what you want.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have everything, but you can sort of pick and choose. But there's not a huge selection.
That's right. And if you go up to the counter, they'll probably only let you put like 3 things on your plate.
Exactly.
Whereas at the buffets in other places, you could just pile it as high as you want.
And there's like 6 different little areas. They're not even little areas of places where you're just like, food, more food. Wow, this is nothing but meat and tons of it. And then like three areas for dessert. You know, there's always bread and other stuff, which is in the U.S., not no offense to the U.S., just not as good as it is here in Europe. Bread is so much better. But there, I used to enjoy in the U.S. going to those places growing up because it's like, I can pick and choose what I want. So in a way, this connects with what we're going to talk about with Generation Z. And we're not just going to throw Generation Z under the bus because there's actually some good stuff there that we're going to draw out from a particular research that's done on an annual basis. So we're definitely in summer mode here on this podcast. We're about to splash into summer.
We're already wearing short sleeve shirts.
Exactly. You have to be. It's
Hello,
warm.
YouTube people who can see our shirts.
We enjoy the viewers watching.
Yes.
And we should have done some Hawaiian shirts or something. I just not thought about this.
Well, we did just come from a retreat with our formation students where we had a tropical party one of the evenings, and I remember you looked really good in that flamingo shirt.
So that's what I was thinking of. I should have brought that flamingo shirt and worn it on the podcast. It would have given I don't know, maybe a unique contrast to our white background with some books here, potentially. So splashing into summer, just a shout out now to Laura Patty, Tyler's wife, our current producer of this podcast. That's a phrase that she has used quite a lot recently. And maybe you guys are looking forward to also going to like water parks or something. My family likes to do that, but I mean, why get wet? That's my philosophy. But one of the things both of us are going to do this summer is theological reflection.
Yeah.
Via research for even a book that we're hoping to write, some themes related to this podcast. I'm really excited to dive into that, have some conversations together, and eventually we'll have some conversations with our listeners as well about that. That'd be great. So that's super exciting. And you know what? We'd like to hear from you too.
Oh.
So for mission... Praxology at, now I can't remember the website.
At formission.org.uk.
Praxology at formission.org.uk. Write to us and let us know what you're up to this summer. Our task for today, though, is to think about summer ministry, which is very different here in Central and Eastern Europe, and then connecting that with Generation Z. So, Tyler, can you remind us first, especially since I've just found out recently, it's for some reason, like within other parts of the world, generations are talked about and emphasized frequently. But here in Europe, it appears from recent conversations I've had with several people that generations are not talked about very often. So the comparisons that we might be doing are perhaps somewhat unique. And because of that, define and describe Generation Z for us.
Yeah, so Generation Z, well, and just to follow up on that comment, we were... yesterday, we were teaching in a high school, and I made a comment about Generation Z, about the people sitting in the audience being Generation Z, and they kind of looked at me like, I am? and then I told them something about themselves, and they were like, oh yeah, that is me. so maybe not using the terminology, but the reality is certainly carries across multiple generations and even continents. So a couple things about Generation Z is that it's one of the most truly global cultures or global generations, in that a generation. Yeah, it is amazing. Generation Z person here in the Czech Republic is going to look pretty similar to a Generation Z person in North America or elsewhere. There are lots of crossovers because of the connectedness through social media. And so that's one aspect. What are some other elements of Gen Z that you could think of?
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about with Gen Z months ago at this point on the podcast is the idea of desiring real help, but also being given freedom and space to figure it out. And so learning how to do that it can be very much of a challenge. We'll revisit some of those things today. But there's a high value of self-sufficiency, but also a high value of mentorship. And those two things might seem like polar opposites, self-sufficiency and mentorship. But those two things put together is what Gen Z craves. And we'll try to even draw that idea out further from that previous episode here in just a little while. I think one thing that connects to connect like Generation Z with our biblical theology of mission, moving into the summertime, one thing is the idea of presence. Right, absolutely. The idea of holiness on mission, a particular kind of reflection of God's presence in front of other people. So Gen Z desires to see we talked before also about the why and the how. Generation C doesn't want to be told like what to do. They want to know why. So they need the why and the how connected, meaning that they actually desire the input of older people as long as they have the freedom to actually implement them themselves, like I was just saying. Right.
And authenticity is a really high value, but it's not just that, I'll do whatever is most natural to me. They desire change and growth, but they want it to come from a place of conviction and like honesty, rather than somebody telling them, oh, here's the key to a better life. You just do this, 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 and then you'll be good. They want to discover that in a way that feels true to who they are. So that's very much connected to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and to actually even do something about it.
Yeah.
Which is where millennials, me and you are millennials. We can have a tendency to idealize something and never like make something happen. Yeah. And Gen Z goes, well, why?
Yeah, it's a good Gen Z is very, very aware of their insufficiencies or the ways in which the world does not work the way it should. And they're much more quick to maybe get involved themselves or to say, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take personal ownership over fixing this problem, which is great, better than maybe some of us millennials who are more apt to wait on the systems to change by themselves, perhaps.
Yes. There is a good self-reflection within Generation Z.
Yeah, there is.
It sometimes needs to be guided, but whose doesn't? Like that's normal. So I think that's actually something great that we can emphasize with the younger Generation Z, and potentially even the one behind it. Was it? It was just termed very recently. I think it was.
Like the up and coming generation?
Yeah, I think it's Generation Alpha or something like that.
Oh, I'm not even aware.
So
of that.
we'll see what's passed on from us,
probably
Gen
our
Z,
kids.
others. I think so. Yeah.
Yikes.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll learn about our kids.
We'll learn about our kids.
That's gonna be useful. Yeah. So I think we're thinking about sort of chill, more relaxed summer, putting these ideas together, biblical theology of mission in practice with the current generation. That's quite large in terms of high school camps. That's right. Ministry,
and they're ministry. This generation. Maybe why we're focusing on this as well is that this, youth, the period of youth is a period of where of self-discovery, of kind of setting one's course for the future. And so there are lots of young people asking deep questions about life, thinking about their future, where they're headed. And it's great that we're able here to, like you said, bring together our biblical theology of mission and also think, how does that intersect with people who are right now who need the things that God has to offer.
Yeah, and connecting those two things is beyond just reflection. It starts there, but you can sit back on your couch and reflect and then never do anything. But it really boils down or condenses down into one word: presence.
Yes.
So
missional presence, if you want to use two words.
Precisely. We can use two words. Okay. I think one statement here is quite simple and obvious, yet very profound if we allow ourselves to reflect on it. And I mean self-reflect as in the sense of, what am I doing about it this summer? How am I engaging with Generation Z people? Or maybe you don't have any contact, but you're more with millennials, etc. Still, that I think this statement works. How am I participating in God's mission by developing relationships with these people? So the statement: build relationships by being present with young people this summer.
Yeah,
that idea of presence. Tyler, what do you think?
Oh man, I mean, even just reflecting on our experience being in a high school yesterday, which was a little bit of a culture shock because we spend a lot of time with college students,
yeah,
who are some of them are Gen Z, but not so purely as what we experienced yesterday. And it was so interesting being in the classroom and feeling this kind of vibe of okay, now we'll see what you're really about.
Yeah.
Like we're coming in, nobody cares about our credentials, our experience, our background. They want to see, is this guy for real?
Yeah. What are we about? Who are we?
That's right. And they're asking those questions. And I felt a little pressure then of like, oh, okay, how am I representing this? But if what you're saying is the key, the important thing is just being engaged, present, being real, being vulnerable, being authentic, and not moving on too quickly. And so kind of sitting in that uncomfortability with a student, listening, asking questions, just being present, that can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And as I'm reflecting now, the seminar that I was doing, I was trying to be present with the students, and at one point I stopped and I actually said, now, if you give me your feedback, I'm going to literally craft the end of our session towards what you said. Like, I want you to be, and it's not like I want you to be engaged selfishly because I need something to happen. It's like, I want you to grow in this. You came to this seminar, even if you didn't want to be here, you're still here. You can still grow and still learn something. Yeah. What are those things? And show that it's about more than just, I'm the master in the front of the knowledge and conveying that forward. And at one point I even stopped because I recognize I'm talking to Generation Z people. And I go, by the way, what I just said, we're actually practicing right now. And I was trying to connect for them that I'm not just a person talking about a topic. Yeah. I'm a person actually with them trying to grow in the same topic. Yes. To show a sense of vulnerability. Like I'm with you. I'm not the guru in the front or whatever the phrase is.
Sage on the stage.
Sage on the stage. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah. I'm definitely not that. I'm just trying to facilitate, discussion and growth on the seminar topic that I was given. But Tyler, let's move more deeply now. Mm-hmm. That's a great example and segue really into some of the, what can we say, key distinctives, or what? Well, I'll let you introduce SpringTide Research and maybe what they call it, and then we can list out the several things and talk about them.
So one key piece in this search for authenticity is this impulse to kind of create for each individual person to kind of create their own bundle of faith. If you remember back to our session, our episode on
when we teach formation, we call them sessions. That was a slip of the tongue.
Yes, thank you. We talked about missional authority and Gen Z. We talked about there's like Gen Z have a distrust of institutions that they feel are too rigid or actually don't produce the change that they claim they do. So they're kind of self-perpetuating machines that don't actually have any life to them. Whether that's true or not is secondary matter, but their perception of it does matter. And so there's this desire to examine, to understand, but then also to kind of reform their religious or spiritual identity from multiple sources. So a great example of this was we had a girl, a 21-year-old girl living with us for a few weeks. And she's actually a refugee from Ukraine. And we were talking about her experiences with believers, and she had some connections to the Baptist church in Ukraine. And so we were asking her, like, do you think you're going to find a church here? What does your faith look like? And she said, I really appreciated my Baptist friends, but I also want to explore other religions, and I want to understand what other religions have to offer. And I was like, ding, 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 Gen Z, like that's classic, because there's this desire of like, this is okay. This isn't bad, but let's see if there's anything else that I can kind of bring in here to create my own unique kind of spiritual identity.
Yeah, pick and choose from the buffet.
That's right. Back to your buffet analogy. This schnitzel is good, but like I also like Indian food, and I also like, some sushi. So like, why can't I put all that together on one plate?
Exactly.
Now, anyone with an aesthetic, what's it called? Like inclination is going to be like, no, you can't put schnitzel and sushi together. And similarly with, if you have a spiritually aesthetic inclination, you're going to think, oh, you can't combine, like, I don't know, you can't combine Christianity with Eastern religions, and you're right. Doesn't really work. But that argument doesn't really work with Gen Z. They are curious. They want to explore. They want to create an identity that is honest and real to who they are.
And one thing that we can affirm, like finding a commonality before just dissecting everything, very important, not just in apologetics and everything. To affirm Gen Z, I have one thing that's really an underlying assumption of the buffet analogy is I like what religion has to offer. Yeah. Now they need help defining religion and figuring that out, and space should be given for asking questions because our God can handle questions. Yeah. But there's an inherent assumption of spirituality is actually a good thing.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
we should affirm it and say, yes, let me help you figure this out in the appropriate way. We'll discuss that.
Yes. So another thing that I'll highlight as a positive in all of this is the search for an authentic, a real spirituality, not just a mechanical spirituality, which I think is awesome. That they really, if they're going to do this, they want to do it in a way that's true and real and transformative as well. That actually works in their life.
Right. And an example of this that I just happened very recently. We also had some Ukrainian refugees staying with us. The mother is we're a millennial, and the daughter is Gen Z. And they come from religious background of Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And one of the things they notice in staying with us, and this is not me building myself up, that's beyond the point. But in staying with us, they realized, like, we believe in the same God, but you and I are different in how that looks.
Yeah. And
they kept saying some things, and the mother just within the last 2 weeks placed her faith in Christ. Which is amazing. And we're praying for the daughter as well. But one of the things that we noticed was they would make comments of, and I'm not throwing the Orthodox Church, under the bus or anything like that unduly, but they would say, we never can do this because we have to go to the building and we have to confess and do this, and we have to do some purification rituals before we can actually approach the priest and be forgiven of sins and stuff. And it was like, it's just really cool to see them like, oh, I can just pray to God
and receive forgiveness
and receive. And it's like, it's just really cool. Understanding. And this connects with the idea of what SpringTide Research, their annual paper, I guess I'll call it. We'll place in the show notes so you have access to it. Hopefully you'll be able to be given access to it, and it's not just a US-based IP thing. But we'll see.
If you get blocked, use a VPN.
But I think this example shows the point of overall well-being and a search for overall well-being, not just something that you believe, cool, but it doesn't affect your life.
That's right.
They're looking for something that truly does, and that's how they noticed some of the differences of how the two different traditions are played out in real life.
Absolutely. Well, there's so much that could be said. Yeah. Okay. Let's maybe go into the actual research and put some scaffolding out for us to be able to start thinking about these things. So this is SpringTide Research does an annual study, what's called the state of religion and young people, and they're particularly looking at young people in the United States and North America. But as we said, Gen Z is a pretty much global phenomenon. So a lot of these things, I think, are true here. We've
at least but I'm sure you have as well, tested these things in our formation classroom with European students from 6-7 different countries, and these things ring true at least in some way. That's
right. So you mentioned a very important beginning point, that Gen Z is interested in the spiritual life, spiritual truths, spiritual realities. They are, which is a great place to start. So, and as they are exploring their spirituality, whether they are coming from a non-spiritual background or they're coming from a religious background, I mean, everybody, that's kind of maybe an overstatement, but pretty much everybody is reshaping their spiritual religious identity. And the term that SpringTide Research uses is rebundling. So, or buffeting, according to our analogy. So rebundling in terms of, it's maybe a good analogy is like, 30 years ago, the way that you got music was you went to the store and you got a CD of 12 songs, and it didn't matter if you only liked 2, you had to buy the whole CD. Yeah. Today, you can create a Spotify playlist and pick those 2 songs that you like, stick them in a playlist, and then you can pull from other places and create your own mix, your own bundle. Yeah. we used to do that back in the day with CDs as well, with burning CDs. But maybe even that flexibility of the Spotify approach is also true of kind of today. It's like, oh, okay, I like that. It doesn't require a lot of effort or thought behind it, but it's a rebundling. So here's some things that SpringTide emphasizes as important in that rebundling process. So again, they are exploring spirituality, and here's how they do it. Here's what motivates it. The first thing is curiosity. Young people are curious about faith. And one important stat is that about 52% of respondents answered positive to this statement. I don't want to be told answers about faith and religions. I would rather discover answers on my own.
And that's the self-sufficiency thing.
Self-sufficiency. So I know that there's other things, but I want to engage in the process of self-discovery, and it's motivated by a curiosity.
I want to be active is what I hear also.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Which is amazing. It's a great, yeah. I'm taking responsibility for my own spiritual journey. That's great. That's really great. We can totally work with that. So curiosity. Second thing is a search for what's motivated by a search for wholeness and well-being. We see this a lot actually in, if you even look at the social media presence of Gen Z, you see this kind of lens that people are interested in psychological well-being, in health, in mental health, in their spiritual lives also, but then also in social well-being and other areas. They're interested in a life that is whole, that is complete, that is, what's another word? That is cohesive.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful. And so they're interested in how faith in particular intersects with these other areas of well-being. So we can do you want to say something about
just
that?
An example from again this seminar we were doing yesterday. We should we give a shout out to the school?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So Beskedy Mountain Academy, not too far away from where we live in Friedland, Czech Republic.
Yes.
Wonderful time. And one of the girls afterwards kind of embodied this. My seminar was on basically not fighting our brain, because we spend most of our time fighting our brain when we're attempting to study. And I'll just pause myself on hundreds of examples that are in my head right now. This girl came up to me afterwards and she said, when this happens, with study habits and in school, I get a knot in my stomach.
Yeah.
And so she's automatically connecting like this study habits, etc., and not just compartmentalizing that like many people could, and saying, well, this produces this effect. And I think what she's after is actually a sense of holistic well-being.
That's right.
So I gave her some tips, etc., but I think that's a good example of like she's on a search for more than just a study habit or a study technique. It's like, how does that integrate into my overall life for holistic well-being?
That's right. And connected to that is a conviction that, on this search for well-being, it doesn't make sense to sacrifice one type of well-being for another. Mm-hmm. So as an example, it will not make sense to a Gen Z person that in order for them to grow spiritually, they, I don't know, need to work themselves to death, and they need to, sacrifice their relational well-being and maybe cut themselves off from their friends. They need to be given tools for integration and for creating a web of well-being that is held together by faith. So that's a real great thing as well, because Christ does offer us a whole life, and we have access to that in the power of the Spirit.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So the desire for personal growth is a big motivator in that search for well-being. Mm-hmm. So that's number 2. So we've said curiosity, wholeness, and third one is collaboration, connected to the curiosity, but also separate, and connects to what we talked about in our authority podcast episode, that Gen Z wants to create together as well and appreciate your perspective and what you bring, and wants also for their voice to be heard and to be appreciated. And so together, if we can come to the table and create something beautiful, new, something that makes sense, that's really motivating.
Yep.
Gen Z is more exposed to different cultures and backgrounds than probably any other generation has, and there's a deep appreciation for the schnitzel, for the Indian food, for the sushi, and they want to ask the question, well, can we do some fusion? Can we do some Asian fusion maybe, or like what else can we do together? How can we carry this project forward?
Yeah, or like my son who wants to put ketchup on everything and create his own type of fusion.
That's a very specific type of fusion. Toddler fusion.
Toddler fusion. Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, maybe the motivation is to include them in the process, of, again, not just us as the experts who figured it out, telling them, oh, here's what you need to do and here's how you need to think about these things, but asking them, well, what do you think? How would you approach this question? And then also being willing to share your own opinion as well. Again, bring it to the table, collaborating.
Yeah, and then maybe mention the fourth, and then we'll move into specific examples. Yeah.
The last one is flexibility, which we've mentioned before. That is a really important piece in the rebundling. The suspicion of rigid systems, the suspicion of the CD where, you have to take the whole package,
but only 2 songs are good.
But only 2 songs are really good. And that might be true. That might be totally the reality, that the other songs are terrible, but I still have to take this, I have to buy the whole thing. Gen Z is not going to be up for that. They're going to find different ways to grow spiritually. And so an example of that would be, if growing spiritually means going to this church with these extra layers of practices and things that don't really make sense, it's going to be very hard unless those practices are explained well, it's going to be hard for them to have buy-in. And they want to have a flexibility to continue to rediscover, to continue to discover, that they haven't, the journey's not over yet. I figured these things out. Now I'm done. Now I can move on with my life. No, they want a lifelong journey of exploring spirituality. So those are, okay. So curiosity, wholeness, collaboration, and flexibility. Thank you, SpringTide Research.
Yeah, it's excellent research that they've put together. So back to our statement: build relationships by being present with young people this summer.
There you go.
This doesn't need to look like total identification. In the biblical theology of mission, in the history of mission, there's a movement that says we have to, literally the saying is go native. And what that means is I have to take off my culture and my worldview and completely adapt to the culture that I am in. And it need not look like this, like total identification, but it does mean adapting or adopting maybe certain practices in order to engage meaningfully. Perhaps using various forms of social media that you do not typically use right now. I'm speaking to myself. I don't use social media very often, and I'm working hard to actually do so. I struggle to think whatever I say, somebody's actually going to care about. So I'm just like, whatever. But I'm working towards posting more on things, and I need to get. I have an Instagram account. It needs to happen.
It does need to. I've tagged you before, and you did not repost, and that was really damaging to our relationship. So
yes, I mean it, but really for some it can be.
Yes,
and I need to get better in this area. A big one in terms of the flexibility, and especially Gen Z having a high self-sufficiency or high personal mobility, scheduling free time so that you can simply plan to waste it.
Yeah.
Like there's a phrase in theology, waste time together with God. That's kind of the idea. Like you literally plan to not plan something so that if something comes up, then you can go do it. And that can like directly relate to Gen Z. It was like, we're going to go do this now. Oh, great. I can actually join you. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because most of the time stuff is so scheduled out that it's not a possibility. So doing that, wasting time can help to connect with Gen Z more. They get to see more of who you actually are. And you're given a chance to be a presence for God there. whether or not you're discipling them or they're not believers yet, through being relational, through connecting, and allowing them to see not just that you represent some institution that believes certain things, but that you actually are living it out and that you truly care. Like you're truly trying to embody participation in Christ to them so they can see, wow,
Yes.
Jesus is a sacrificial servant and I see that through you. Things like this. I think there are many, many other things that can be said. But in terms of character, it's really important for that to be modeled. And you can't just talk about character all the time. The Gen Z needs to actually
they need to see
it.
Mm-hmm. And experience it. Yeah.
Yeah, if they can see and taste and feel and touch it with as many senses as possible, then they're going to be more willing to receive actual input from you to where you can actually guide. And what we were doing earlier, like a meta learning moment, I love these, is talking about the four bundle, like how Gen Z rebundles in four different ways. Faith. We were doing that to provide some scaffolding in your mind to build off of so you can make connections more broadly.
Yes.
And we can do the exact same thing for Gen Z if we're simply present with them, and building those relationships, helping them to see our character and not just, talk about character in general.
Yep.
So Tyler, what else do you think? What's needed to relate well for those of our listeners, those who are watching on YouTube this summer?
Yeah.
For Gen Z.
Yeah. Well, maybe at this point is a good opportunity to have a shout out to one of our own students who's going to be graduating soon and who's working on his bachelor thesis. Mm-hmm. Hello, Boja. Hope you're doing well.
Ciao, Boja.
Ciao, Boja. Boja is investigating how valuable kind of the coaching approach is for discipling young people. And he found something really interesting
cool.
out. So if you're familiar with the coaching method, it's all about asking questions, and it's about kind of allowing space for the other person to really determine their pathway and to take ownership over their kind of journey, mm-hmm. without putting too much pressure or advice or
dictating to them.
That's right. Dictating, here's what you should do. Contrast to maybe a mentorship approach, which is more about, okay, I have some experience, I have some expertise, let me help you analyze things and then give you some suggestions on how to move forward. It sounds like, or we might expect, the coaching approach is perfect for Gen Z because they want to discover things on their own, they want to be authentic, they want to rebundle. So maybe our posture should just be, just ask questions all summer. But Boja actually found out that that's not always helpful. Mm-hmm. It is helpful, a helpful starting point. We can always ask better questions and more questions. But he found that Gen Z did reach a point where they actually didn't have enough scaffolding or experience to know where to go next.
And that's where they want mentorship, but high self-sufficiency.
There you go.
Boja is onto it.
He's onto it.
It's perfect example. So
he realized that he actually needed to bring in some of those mentorship pieces in appropriate ways where Gen Z actually wants some perspective and some help, but then they also want to be given the freedom to do with it what they will and to apply it in their life in a real and authentic way. So for example, if you're talking to somebody about their walk with Jesus and you ask some good questions and they might say, I just don't know how to grow anymore. Like I've tried it all. I'm lost. You might start by asking some good questions about, okay, what are some areas you want to grow in? What have you tried in the past? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? But then there might be space for you to say, hey, here's some spiritual practices that the church has been using for hundreds and thousands of years that have sustained, the church and believers. Why don't you try some of these? Mm-hmm. So you're creating a framework, some scaffolding, some connection, some deeper rootedness, and then giving them the space to take it forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this combo of coaching and mentoring, I think is a really helpful one as we go into the summer. Get ready to ask good questions, but also get ready to share of your experience in a way that's honest and authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. No, part of me has been wondering and whenever I have chance to actually do some further research to see if it works, is techniques in counseling. So I have some personal experience through local churches in a non-clinical counseling setting, but I've been sort of academically trained to an extent by licensed professional counselors, and empathy statements are huge. And empathy statement doesn't have to. You sometimes you can say it, and it might be putting words in somebody's mouth. But it doesn't have to be that way. A true empathy statement is when somebody says words, you're listening for their heart, and so you're drawing out their heart through an empathic statement that could be. You're not feeling loved right now, because in the naming that deeper area that maybe they're talking about. And if you hit the nail on the head in a counseling session, people just start opening up, and you're like, you get me. And then they're just talking and talking and talking and talking. And so that's where that's really can be helpful. But maybe since it's not an actual counseling setting with Gen Z, if they reach a point, you could simply ask a question. I wonder if this works. Maybe Boja can do some follow-up research on my behalf. Probably not. But I wonder if even asking, I guess this is giving a statement but then asking a question. It seems that you might feel stuck in this area. Is that true? Yeah.
Clarification questions.
If that person says yes, the next question could simply be, would you allow me to give you some input?
There you go. That puts them in the driver's seat. And so they actually have some agency in receiving in an active sense, not just in a passive sense.
And we're about facilitating agency in others. That is the process of discipleship. That is the process of like life in general, but definitely of discipleship.
Yeah.
And I think another area is actually pedagogy, the idea of the teaching. I mean, basically, we just summarize it as the study of teaching practices. And a lot of what's coming out, I'll just say more recently, is some really, really awesome, fun things that I like to adopt and push the rest of our staff in formation to adopt. Because it's useful, because it develops and facilitates agency in another person. It's one thing to learn knowledge and input it, and it's another thing to know how to actually use it. And so in discipleship, most of the time we focus on the knowledge part, and then we just have some sort of assumption like, okay, now that you know it, it's going to affect your life, and you're going to be able to use that to help other people. But how is that even possible if we never actually show somebody through how we are leading them? And so it's always better to put something, you can take this idea and say it to somebody, and unless they connect it with experience, unless they have some sort of scaffolding to put it towards, then they're just taking in an idea. And it's actually better if we can figure out, okay, this person may really need this. How can we get them to see that? Instead of just saying, well, you need this. Gen Z is going to go, no,
I don't.
Rightfully so, unless the person, I think there is space where people can truly do that. But on a regular basis, like nobody wants to receive, you need this, unless they're given a why, especially Gen Z, the deeper answers.
Yeah.
So getting, and maybe this is truly where the coaching questions can come in, and maybe we can throw some resources in the show notes for going deeper into that.
Yeah.
We certainly have a lot of friends within Josiah Venture who have gotten licenses in coaching.
That's right.
And are adapting it into discipleship. I think, and my assumption is sort of for this purpose, to get them to think for themselves, because we always remember, and this is the key. If you want to facilitate agency, long-term retention rather than short-term cram for a test. That's basically what happens. If you remember a time when you crammed for a test and you didn't remember it three days later to a week, it's because it was put in your short-term memory. So if you remember that time, that's what we don't want to happen with our disciples. So if we can get them to first think of something and relate it to an experience of theirs, the coaching really comes in, and the discipleship really comes in helping them to appropriate the right experience. so that they are actually connecting real thoughts that should be, instead of like maybe this and then this over here doesn't make sense. That's where the mentorship can come in, I think, within Gen Z.
That's great. That's really helpful. So as we're wrapping up, I'll again just revisit some of the four areas so we can really think in concrete, form. So
exactly,
we need to be affirming our students' spiritual curiosity because that's a really good thing. And if that's their motivator, is to seek deep understanding, we can totally work with that. In their search for wholeness and well-being, we can also absolutely affirm that as well, that Jesus doesn't just give you a ticket to heaven, but actually the kingdom is near and the Spirit is at work transforming us and this world, and we can get on God's project. Listen back to our biblical theology of mission to understand that. That's something we need to communicate to students, and that will connect with them. Third, collaboration. That's I think a harder one for us Christians sometimes is like this back and forth, and because it can make us feel like maybe truth is a little relative, or like I don't know, it makes us a little uneasy. But I would say that we who have convictions about theology, who have experiences, who have traditions, let's bring those to the table and be honest about them, and seek the deeper why behind why those things are the way that they are, and the things that are true, and help our students see that, and also maybe help us see our convictions in a little bit different light. And then the final of flexibility, understand that the journey that they're on is going to be a long one. It's going to require some patience from us as we are flexible with them as they engage in a process of long-term discovery. And I think that's also something that we can also affirm, that God is big and it will take more than just this lifetime to understand him and to love him better.
Yeah, so, it's an eternal project.
Yes.
Like literally we will always be learning about our Creator, and just at some point we will be in his presence while we're doing so. Which is a mind-blowing thought, I think.
It is.
Yeah, and definitely one. I wonder about giving an example here. Maybe
sure.
Related to yesterday when we were at Beskiddy Mountain Academy. At one point, I simply stopped because I assume most people are feeling defeated. We're talking about study habits, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, that's a problem for me.
Yep.
I always procrastinate. I expected to hear that. I planned for it. We talked about it. Strategies for not doing so and not fighting our brains so we can go spend time with our friends and still get our work done efficiently, well, etc." Excuse me. But one thing I did was I simply stopped and I normalized some of their negative thoughts in the moment. Because like some of them were sort of forced to be. They had 3 seminars to choose. They didn't want to go to the others, but whatever. They had to be. Some of them had to be there, so whatever. But a lot of them still spoke up and were like, "This, I struggle with this. Hey, I struggle with this." I'm like, "Well," and they're all thinking there's nothing that can be done about it. And I'm just saying, my first thought is just to affirm the fact that you're willing to admit out loud that this is hard shows me that you actually want to become essentially a better person. You actually want to grow. And it was like in that moment, as I'm reflecting on it, from that point forward in the seminar, people were much more engaged. So giving that affirmation, but still giving them complete freedom to disagree and to put things in their own experience. Again, longer term retention is if you have a sentence like a big idea of 10 verses of a section of scripture mean this. It's better not to give somebody that one sentence and for them to come up with that same idea themselves.
That's right.
So if you can figure out how to facilitate that agency, people will remember that long term because we remember our own thoughts longer than somebody else's. We just do.
Yep.
But again, even within that, there's a high mobility that you can give Gen Z at the same time of building relationship by positive affirmation. what you're doing there, you might not see that. And this is where it really can become key, right? Oftentimes Gen Z doesn't see something, and that's where they'll get caught up in some of those anxieties. It's like, well, you might not see this, but there's actually a positive here. And when you do that, it's like, wow, they draw near to you as you sort of draw near to them in relationship. And that's really facilitated by some deep thinking on our parts as we relate to Gen Z people this summer.
Ooh. That last statement goes back to our missional presence, yes. Idea of missional presence, drawing near to others so that with the presence of God, so that they will draw near to us and to God. That requires a certain type of presence in the world,
exactly,
facilitated by the Spirit.
Which requires some hard work on our parts, but I think it's definitely worth it if we give some thought to these structures on how we can approach Gen Z in a relaxed summertime. Then we can potentially be more effective simply by focusing on how am I going to build a relationship with them? Mm-hmm. How am I going to be present? How am I a presence of Christ while I'm with them? I mean, there's other questions we can ask, of course. Wasting time with others. So ask questions of people with a curiosity that shows that you want to get them to know, not just them, but also what they value, mm-hmm. their thoughts. And when they share thoughts, ask maybe those probing coaching types of questions to help them further reflect on their own thoughts. Instead of putting other thoughts in their head, the Spirit works with us where we currently are experiencing Him. But the Spirit, oftentimes, if we're thinking about something, we'll lean in and say, this area, yeah. It's not very often that it's just like you whacked over the head with something that's like, wow, I haven't thought about that in 6 years. What's happening? So that same idea, I think, applies on working with people in Gen Z where they are,
yes,
where they're currently experiencing things. And if there's some other piece that you're like, they need to grow in, it can probably wait. Maybe it can't. There's times, but helping them to reflect on their own thoughts. And this way, we're not giving undue advice without showing them that we truly care. And it may reach a point where we're then given a green light to actually enter a mentorship setting or conversation where we actually are able to give some input in a meaningful way. So the goal is to help Gen Z theologically reflect by being a particular kind of presence, reflect on their circumstances to better reflect God as holy agents of His presence in the world, connecting back to the biblical theology of mission. And that's where we'll land it. So enjoy your summer, your vacation, certainly the weather.
Oh, yeah.
Your work. Enjoy your work.
Yes, that too.
Whatever it happens to be. Maybe summer vacation for some of you where you're not working or just part-time. Enjoy that. Seek God's presence in that. Knowing that our God is relational and that wherever we go, His presence is with us. So we are carriers of His presence as we head into summer. It's an amazing thought, worth reflecting on. So thank you again for continuing to join us in our discussions. You truly are participating, and we'd love to continue to hear your feedback. I'm pointing to you on YouTube, and I'm talking to you who are listening, not watching on YouTube, which is okay. There's two different kinds of people, those who watch things and those who listen to them. So both are welcomed. We thank you for listening to us over these last 17 episodes. At this point, we're going to pause for the summer, but we look forward to continuing a lot of these themes of thinking biblically and reflecting theologically and moving towards acting missionally. So go in peace and go in the joy of Christ as you think biblically, reflect theologically, and act missionally in the presence of other Gen Z people this summer.
Woohoo!
Enjoy your summer.
Enjoy your summer. See you in the fall.